Asphalt was still burning when Arthur Price dropped to his knees. Pain shot up his spine, a slow, methodical bolt. The kind of pain old age makes your permanent companion. Crushed cans rolled along the curb around him, the very cans he'd collected since dawn, one by one, bending hundreds of times under a July sun that baked Chicago like an open oven. Each can was worth cents. Each cent was the difference between eating and not eating. His shopping cart was overturned in the gutter. One wheel spun uselessly in the air, ridiculous and pathetic, like everything else in Arthur's life for the past 23 years. Inside it, besides the cans, were 2 pieces of cardboard, folded with the obsessive precision of someone who controls nothing in life except small rituals of order, and a frayed plastic bag holding 2 oranges, now crushed under the tire of a black Audi, and a stale loaf of bread. He'd planned to soak the bread in the watery coffee he'd make tonight, if he managed to collect enough to buy the cheapest powder from the corner store. Arthur slowly raised his head. The afternoon sun blinded him. A circle of people was forming, not to help, but to watch, to film, to turn his humiliation into digital content that would be consumed by millions and forgotten in hours. He recognized those looks. He knew them well. It was the look reserved for roadkill, for drunk homeless men, for useless old people who get in the way of traffic and the hurry of those with important places to be. "Did anyone see what happened?" a woman asked. Her phone held high, recording. "The old man crossed on red," someone lied. "The guy in the car just honked," said another. Lies. All lies. Arthur had crossed on the green, or he thought he had. His eyesight was failing, the sun was in his face, and maybe he really had been confused. Maybe he really was to blame. Because when you are old and poor, the blame always falls on you, even when you are innocent. The young man who had gotten out of the Audi was already gone, leaving only the smell of burnt rubber and a cloud of exhaust fumes still hanging in the hot air. Arthur couldn't remember his face clearly. Just the anger in his eyes, the designer shirt, the mirrored sunglasses reflecting his own pathetic image. A stooped old man in tattered clothes, trying to protect a rusty shopping cart as if it were a treasure. "Get out of the way, you useless old man." The words still echoed in his ears. Useless old man. Arthur began gathering the cans. One by one. His hands were shaking, not just from old age, but from something deeper, something he had learned to swallow over the years, but which now rose in his throat like bile. Humiliation. Shame. The sharp, painful awareness that he was, in fact, useless in the eyes of the world. A burden. An obstacle. Someone who should have the decency to die quickly and stop obstructing the flow of the city. A can rolled near his fingers. He picked it up and realized it was crushed beyond recovery. Useless, like him. He threw it back on the ground. What was the point? What was the point of collecting cans, folding cardboard, waking up before the sun, and dragging this increasingly sore body through the streets of a city that had no room for people like him? "Mister, are you okay?" A young female voice approached. Arthur looked up and saw a girl of about 15, school uniform, backpack on. She knelt beside him and started helping him gather the cans. "I saw what happened. That guy's an asshole." Arthur wanted to thank her, but his voice wouldn't come. His throat was tight, squeezed by that knot that forms when someone is kind to you after you've been torn apart. He just nodded, and the girl smiled, a sad, pitying, but sincere smile. "My grandpa used to collect cans too," she said, putting them back in the cart. "He died last year. I miss him." Arthur finally managed to speak, his voice hoarse. "I'm sorry. That's life, right?" The girl stood up, wiped her hands on her uniform skirt. "Be careful crossing, mister. People drive like maniacs around here." And she was gone, swallowed by the crowd that was already dispersing, bored now that the show was over. Arthur was alone again. Always alone. He stood up with difficulty, every joint protesting, and righted the cart. The front wheel was bent now, which would make pushing it even harder. But what choice did he have? He started walking back to the tenement, dragging the cart along the broken sidewalk. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in orange and pink, colors too beautiful for such an ugly day. Arthur didn't look at the sky. He kept his eyes on the ground, always on the ground, where people like him were supposed to keep their gaze. The neighborhood welcomed him with its usual cacophony. Loud music from different houses competing with each other, children screaming, dogs barking, the smell of fried food mixed with the stench of sewage rising from clogged drains. The tenement was at the end of a narrow alley, a 3-story building that had once been white but was now grey with dirt and neglect. The landlord charged $400 for a 90-square-foot room in the back, windowless, with a shared bathroom in the hallway that served 6 residents and was always filthy. Arthur climbed the external staircase, each step a small torture for his knees. On the second-floor landing, he passed the nurse's door. Anna Preventative. He knew her name because he'd seen it on the mail slots. She worked nights, so she was home during the day, and sometimes Arthur heard the muffled sound of a television through the thin wall. She was kind, always said hello when they passed, and twice she had left a plate of food at his door with a note. Had extra, don't let it spoil. Arthur never knew if it was really extra or if it was pity. He accepted it either way. Pride doesn't fill a stomach. He opened the door to his room and was greeted by the familiar smell of mold and loneliness. The thin mattress on the floor covered by a threadbare sheet. The broken plastic chair he'd pulled from the trash and fixed with wire. The cracked sink that dripped water day and night. Tap, tap, tap. A sonic torture he had stopped hearing because he'd heard it so much. A cardboard box served as a wardrobe, another as a table. On the damp-stained walls, no photos, no memories, no trace that he had once been someone else. Arthur left the cart in a corner, took off his worn-out shoes. The right sole was coming off. Soon he'd have to fix it with shoe glue or wrap it in electrical tape, and let himself fall into the broken chair. The chair groaned under his thin weight. Everything groaned under the weight of life. He looked at his own hands, wrinkled, calloused hands, full of liver spots and small cuts that never healed properly, because his circulation was bad and he had no money for medicine. These hands had done so much. They had signed multi-million-dollar contracts. They had held a wife's hand at the altar. They had cradled babies. They had built an empire, however small, however fleeting. Now, these hands only served to pick up trash. The memory came uninvited, as it always did in moments of fragility. Arthur closed his eyes and saw himself 30 years younger, in a grey suit, in his office overlooking Michigan Avenue. Price Construction. The name was engraved on a brass plaque on the door. He had 3 engineers, 12 employees, contracts with major developers. Nothing extraordinary, nothing compared to the giants of the industry, but it was his. Built brick by brick, contract by contract, with the money his father had left him and a lot of sweat. Marina was alive then. Marina in elegant dresses and French perfume, who hosted dinners for clients and knew exactly what to say to impress the right people. She never truly loved him. Arthur had always known that, but there was respect, complicity, a tacit agreement that together they would build something bigger than their individual feelings. And the children, Robert and Julia. Robert with his serious demeanor, already showing a talent for numbers. Julia with her easy laugh, dreaming of being an architect. Arthur remembered bringing them to the office on weekends, showing them blueprints, teaching them about structures, imagining a future where they would take over the business. All lies, all illusion, all built on sand. The bankruptcy happened fast, like a poorly constructed building collapsing. It started with Gregory Miles, the partner Arthur had accepted under pressure, out of ambition, out of naivety. Gregory brought big contracts, investors, promises of expansion. He also brought fraud, tax evasion, hidden debts. When the IRS knocked on the door, when the auditors started digging through the books, when the newspaper headlines began destroying Price Construction's reputation, it was already too late. Arthur tried to prove his innocence, tried to show he didn't know, that he'd been deceived, that he was as much a victim as the creditors. Nobody believed him. A failed businessman claiming innocence. The oldest story in the world. The lawsuits piled up. The company went bankrupt. The assets were auctioned off. The house, the cars, the savings, everything vanished to pay debts he hadn't even created. Marina filed for divorce before the final judgment. She took the children, moved in with her mother, and blocked his number. The children, then 14 and 16, were forbidden to see him. "He's a criminal," Marina would say. "A failure who will drag us all down into the mud." Arthur was never convicted as a criminal. The courts eventually cleared him of participating in the fraud. But the acquittal came too late, when everything was already lost, when Marina had already remarried a wealthy doctor, when the children had already learned to hate their father without really knowing him. He tried to rebuild, got a job as a security guard at a mall, rented a room in a boarding house. He wrote letters to Robert and Julia that came back unopened, stamped, "Return to sender." Every returned letter was a knife twist. The years passed. The security job ended when the mall closed. He became a janitor in an office building, then a flyer distributor, then an office assistant at 65, delivering packages by bicycle until the day he fell and broke his wrist. After that, nothing. At 70, Arthur slept in a shelter for the first time, then in parks, then wherever he could, until he found the tenement, paying with the money he scraped together from the streets. He had become invisible. And now, at 78, after being shoved and humiliated in the middle of the street, after gathering cans like an animal scavenging for scraps, Arthur wondered, why was he still alive? For what? Night fell completely. The room went dark, and Arthur didn't turn on the light. He saved electricity because the bill was high. He sat in the darkness, listening to the dripping faucet, the sounds of the tenement, the lives happening around him while his own just dragged on. That's when he heard knocking on the wall. 3 quick raps. From the other side, Anna's room. Arthur frowned. Anna never knocked on the wall. Had he been too loud? Was she complaining? The knocks repeated. 3 times. A pause. 3 times again. Arthur stood up slowly and opened his door. In the dimly lit hallway, Anna was standing in front of his door, still in her hospital scrubs, bag on her shoulder. She looked at him with a strange expression. Not pity, not disgust, but something Arthur couldn't identify. Worry, perhaps, or anger. "Mr. Price," she said, her voice low but firm. "I need to talk to you." Arthur stood in the doorway, confused. Nobody needed to talk to him. Nobody had anything to say that he needed to hear. He was just an invisible old man pushing a cart, and the people who needed to talk to him were usually rent collectors or city police telling him to move along. "I wasn't making noise," he said, automatic, defensive. "Sorry if I woke you." Anna shook her head, impatient. "It's not that." "Can I come in?" Arthur hesitated. His room was a disgrace. The smell of mold, the mattress on the floor, the poverty explicit in every inch of the space. But Anna was already stepping inside, not waiting for permission, and he found himself backing up to let her pass. She entered and stopped in the middle of the room, looking around. Arthur expected to see disgust, revulsion, but her face showed only a deep sadness. Anna turned to him. "I saw the video," she said. Arthur blinked. "What video?" "From the street, this afternoon. Someone filmed it and posted it on Twitter." Anna took her phone from her pocket and tapped the screen. "It already has over 1 million views." She turned the screen toward him. Arthur saw himself, on his knees on the asphalt, gathering cans while people around him filmed. The shaky image, the zoom closing in on his old, humiliated face. The comments scrolling beneath. "That's horrible. Jail that asshole in the car. Poor old man. Chicago is lost." 1 million people had seen his humiliation. 1 million strangers knew his shame. Arthur felt his legs weaken. He sat down heavily on the broken chair, which groaned under the sudden weight. Anna put her phone away and knelt in front of him, getting to his eye level. "You don't deserve this," she said, and there was anger in her voice. Not anger at him, but anger at the world that allowed this to happen. "Nobody deserves to be treated like that." "I crossed wrong," Arthur muttered. "I didn't see the light. It was my fault." "It was not your fault." Anna stood up, agitated. "Even if it was, even if you had crossed on red, does that give some rich prick the right to push an elderly man to the ground?" To leave you hurt there while he speeds off in his fancy car. Arthur didn't answer. He had spent so much time accepting that everything was his fault. The bankruptcy, the divorce, the poverty, even this humiliation, that he no longer knew how to defend himself. Anna took a deep breath, controlling her anger. She pulled over the only other available surface, the cardboard box that served as a table, and sat on it, facing Arthur. The box buckled a bit under her weight, but it held. "Mr. Price," she said, calmer now, "how many times have I walked down this hallway and seen you coming or going, always with that cart, always quiet, always polite. I left food at your door because I saw you were struggling. Too thin, worn-out clothes, but always dignified. You never asked for anything, never complained. You just existed, as if you were afraid of being a bother." Arthur looked at his hands. It was true. He was afraid of being a bother, afraid of being one more problem in a world already full of problems. Today, when I saw that video, something in me broke. Anna ran a hand over her face, tired. She had just finished a 12-hour shift, Arthur realized. She must be exhausted. "I work in a public hospital, Mr. Price. I see people suffering every day. I see people die. I see misery, pain, injustice. And I try to help, but it's so much. It's so much that sometimes I feel numb, you know? Like I've built up a shell so I don't feel everything. Otherwise I'd go crazy." She paused, her eyes shining. "But when I saw that video, when I saw you on your knees on that asphalt, gathering your cans while that bastard drove away, the shell cracked. And I thought, no, not one more. Not this one. I won't let the world swallow another one." Arthur felt something tighten in his chest. It had been so long since anyone had cared. So long. "I don't know what you want me to do," he said, his voice thick. "I'm just an old man. I can't sue anyone. I don't have money for a lawyer. I have nothing." "I'm not talking about a lawsuit," Anna said. "I'm talking about dignity, about justice, about not letting this slide." She leaned forward. "Tell me your story, Mr. Price. Please. I need to understand how a man ends up like this. Because I look at you, and I see education. I see posture. I see someone who was once something else. Tell me, from the beginning." And maybe it was the day's exhaustion. Maybe it was the unexpected kindness. Maybe it was simply because he couldn't bear to carry it all alone anymore. But Arthur began to talk. He told her about Price Construction, about the contracts, the buildings he helped raise downtown, the years of hard work. He told her about Marina, about the children, about the life he used to have. Anna listened in silence, without interrupting, just nodding now and then to show she was paying attention. He told her about Gregory Miles, the traitorous partner, about the fraud discovery, the lawsuits, the bankruptcy, about how he lost everything, company, house, family, about the letters returned by his children, about the slow, inexorable fall, from businessman to security guard, from guard to janitor, from janitor to can collector. "I tried," Arthur said, and now the tears were flowing freely down his wrinkled face. He didn't even try to hide them anymore. "I tried to rebuild. I tried to reach out to my children. I tried to work, tried to live with dignity. But every year it got harder. The jobs dried up. My body didn't respond. People looked at me and just saw a useless old man." Anna had tears in her own eyes now. She reached out and took his hand, that wrinkled, calloused hand that had built buildings and now collected trash. "You are not useless," she said firmly. "You are a person who was abandoned by a cruel system, by a cruel family, by a society that discards the elderly like trash. But you are not trash. You are not." Arthur wept. He wept in a way he hadn't wept in decades. He wept for the lost life, for the children who grew up without him, for the wife who despised him. He wept for all the years of loneliness, of hunger, of cold, of humiliation. He wept because someone finally saw him as a human being, not just an obstacle in the street. Anna stayed there, holding his hand, letting him cry. She offered no empty platitudes like, "It will be okay," or God has a plan. She just stayed. And sometimes, presence is the only medicine that works. When Arthur finally calmed down, Anna stood up and went to the sink. She wet a cloth in the thin stream of dripping water and returned, gently wiping his face. "Did you have dinner tonight?" she asked. Arthur shook his head. He had only eaten the stale bread that morning. "Wait here." Anna left and returned 5 minutes later with a plastic container. Rice, beans, a piece of chicken. Real food. She placed it in his hand. "Eat. I'll be back tomorrow and we'll talk more." "Why?" Arthur asked, genuinely confused. "Why are you doing this?" Anna smiled, a sad but sincere smile. "Because someone has to. And because I've been invisible too." She went to the door, paused, and turned back. "My mother was a housekeeper. She raised me and my 2 brothers alone. Worked until her bones ached, until her hands were deformed from scrubbing floors. And when she got old, when she got sick, my brothers disappeared. Said they didn't have time, didn't have money. I took care of her alone until the end. She died in my arms in a hospital hallway, waiting for an ICU bed that never came." Anna wiped her eyes. "I know what it's like to be discarded, Mr. Price. I know. And I swore I would never turn my back on someone suffering what my mother suffered." She left, closing the door softly behind her. Arthur sat alone in the dark, holding the container of warm food. And for the first time in a very long time, he didn't feel completely invisible. Anna couldn't sleep that night. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the story Arthur had told. There was something in it that bothered her. Not the tragedy itself. She saw tragedies every day at the hospital, but some specific detail that her brain couldn't quite grasp. It was only in the early hours of the morning, just as she was about to drift off, that the memory clicked. The trust fund. Arthur had mentioned it in passing, almost as a footnote in the story of his ruin. Before the bankruptcy, he had transferred some assets into a trust fund in the name of a niece who had died young. The lawyer had disappeared, the papers were lost, and Arthur never looked for that money again. He was too ashamed, too broken, too convinced he deserved nothing. Anna sat up in bed, her heart racing. She had been working with bureaucracy for 15 years. She dealt with hospital paperwork, patient documentation, old records, disorganized systems. If there was one thing she understood, it was how information could be lost in bureaucratic mazes, but also how it could be recovered if you knew where to look. What if the fund still existed? What if the money was still there, forgotten in some bank, waiting? It was unlikely. Arthur was probably right. It had just been the desperate gesture of a ruined man, one last act before the total shipwreck. But what if it wasn't? Anna got up, went to the old computer in the corner of her room, and turned it on. The screen slowly glowed blue. The machine was old, but it worked. She opened a browser and started searching. Trust funds, how they worked, how long they remained active, what happened when the owner made no withdrawals, how to search for information on old funds. The more she read, the more her excitement grew. Trust funds could lie dormant for decades. The money didn't disappear. It stayed there, accumulating or losing value depending on how it was invested. If no one claimed it, it simply sat, waiting. Anna looked at the clock. 4:30 in the morning. In a few hours, she'd have to leave for another shift. But she couldn't sleep now, not with this possibility burning in her head like a fever. She spent the rest of the pre-dawn hours researching. She noted the names of agencies she could search: the Treasury Department, old county registries, the National Association of Unclaimed Property. She noted phone numbers, emails, procedures. She found a government system where people could check for forgotten money in banks. At 7 in the morning, with dark circles under her eyes but a determined glint in them, Anna showered, put on her scrubs, and left for her shift. But first, she knocked on Arthur's door. He opened it, surprised. He was already awake. Old people sleep little, and Arthur always woke before the sun. "Mr. Price," Anna said quickly, "do you remember the name of the bank where that fund was opened? The lawyer's name? Any document you might still have?" Arthur blinked, confused. I don't have anything." It's been over 20 years. I lost everything. He paused. Why are you asking this? Because I'm going to find out if that money exists. Anna looked him straight in the eye. And if it exists, you are going to get back what is yours. But that was so long ago. It must have expired or something. Nothing. I'm going to look. Anna was already heading down the stairs. Try to remember any detail, anything. I'll be back tonight. Arthur stood in the doorway, watching her disappear down the stairs. That woman was crazy. Generous, but crazy. There was no money. He was sure of it. It had just been the delirium of a desperate man trying to save something from the wreckage. But still, as he closed the door and prepared for another day of collecting cans, Arthur found himself trying to remember the name of the bank, the lawyer's name, the approximate date, and deep in his chest, in a place he thought had died long ago, a tiny, pathetic little thing began to stir. Hope. A dangerous thing. Hope. The kind of thing that kills you when it's ripped away again. But even knowing that, even trying to suffocate it, Arthur couldn't stop it from growing, fragile and stubborn as a flower, pushing up through cracked pavement. Anna Preventative had learned one thing working 15 years in a public hospital. Bureaucracy is a maze, but every maze has a center. You just need to know where to start and have enough patience not to give up when you hit a wall. During her break, while drinking watery coffee in the hospital break room, she called the Treasury Department. Half an hour on hold, transferred 4 times, until she got someone who actually understood the unclaimed property system. No, she couldn't check on behalf of a third party without power of attorney. Yes, the owner would have to do the search himself, but they could walk her through the procedures. Anna scribbled notes on a paper napkin. SSN, date of birth, online system, physical agencies if the system failed. On her next break, she called Legal Aid, the local bar association, a lawyer friend of a friend who did pro bono work. Every call was a clue. Every clue opened 2 new doors. Most led to dead ends, but a few led forward. And then, at 3 in the afternoon, between a pneumonia patient and another with an open fracture, she found something. On the National Unclaimed Property website, there was a search tool. Anyone could check if they had money forgotten in banks. Anna had Arthur's social security number. He had shown her his old battered ID when she helped him sign up for a pharmacy discount program weeks ago. She typed in the number with trembling hands. The screen loaded, and loaded, and loaded, and then it appeared. Unclaimed funds found in your name. Anna felt her heart leap. She clicked for more details. The system didn't show the exact amount, only that there was something available at a financial institution that had changed its name 3 times since 2000. But it was there. It existed. She had to sit down. A colleague passed by and asked if she was okay. Anna nodded, but she wasn't okay. She was in shock. Because if this was true, if there was really money there, then Arthur Price had spent years in misery, collecting cans, sleeping in a filthy tenement, being humiliated in the streets, while resources in his name sat forgotten in some digital vault. The injustice was so brutal that Anna wanted to cry, but she didn't have time for tears. She had work to do. When she knocked on Arthur's door at 9 o'clock that night, she was still in her scrubs, her face marked by the exhaustion of a double shift. Arthur opened the door, and she walked in without ceremony, a laptop under her arm. She had borrowed it from a colleague. "Mr. Price, sit here," she said, pointing to the broken chair. She crouched on the floor herself, opening the computer on her knees. "I need you to do something right now. Don't ask, don't argue, just do it, okay?" Arthur was frightened by her intensity. He nodded. Anna opened the website, went to the unclaimed funds search, and turned the screen to him. "Type in your SSN here." "But I already know I don't have anything." "Type." Arthur typed with trembling fingers, getting it wrong twice before he got it right. Anna helped him confirm his date of birth. The screen loaded. And then Arthur saw it. Unclaimed funds found in your name. He stared, paralyzed, looking at the words as if they were written in an alien language. Anna was watching his face, watching the confusion slowly turn to comprehension, and the comprehension turn into something she couldn't identify. Fear, maybe, or the terror of hope? This can't be true, Arthur murmured. It has to be a mistake. It has to be. Click here, Anna instructed. To see more details. Arthur clicked. The system asked for more verification, more data. Anna guided him patiently. And then finally, the full information appeared. Trust Fund, XPR 1847. Institution, Safira Bank SA. Currently United National Bank. Approximate value available, $687,434.18. Last activity, 03/14/2002. Arthur read the number 3 times. 4, 5, as if repeating the words could make them make sense. $687,000. Almost $700,000. With his name on it. Waiting for over 20 years. No, it can't be, he whispered, his voice breaking. I don't have this money. I'm poor. I collect cans. Anna gently closed the laptop and took his hands, which were shaking violently now. You do, Mr. Price. That fund you opened before the bankruptcy, remember? You were right. It existed. And it sat there all these years, earning interest, growing, waiting for you. Tears began to run down Arthur's face. Not tears of joy. Not yet. They were tears of something more complex, more painful. Tears for all the wasted years, for all the hungry nights, for all the humiliations he had suffered while there was money in his name, forgotten, useless. I could have lived, he said, his voice raw. All these years. I could have had a home, food, dignity. I could have... He couldn't finish. The sob came out violently, ripping through his chest. Anna hugged him. That old man, smelling of mold and sweat, trembling in her arms as all the pain of decades poured out. She held him, letting her own tears wet his shoulder. But now you will, she said firmly. Now we're going to get this money, and you will have a home, and food, and dignity. I'm going to help you. We're going to solve this together. Arthur pulled away, wiped his face on the back of his hand. He looked at Anna with a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. Why are you doing this? You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. Because it's the right thing to do, Anna said simply. And because someone has to. But getting the money wouldn't be simple. Anna discovered this in the following days. As she navigated the banking bureaucracy that seemed specifically designed to stop people from receiving what was rightfully theirs. The bank wanted documentation, a current ID, proof of residence, tax returns for the last 5 years, a certificate of good standing, forms in triplicate, signed and notarized. Arthur had none of that. His ID was from 1983, yellowed and almost illegible. He had no bank account, no proof of residence in his name, and he had never filed taxes because he had no income to declare. To the system, he was a ghost, and ghosts don't collect inheritances. Anna spent the next few nights researching, calling, negotiating. She found out that legal aid could help, that there were free legal assistance programs, that the bank, despite the monstrous bureaucracy, was legally obligated to release the money if the documentation was in order. It took 3 weeks. 3 weeks of back and forth trips to public offices, of filling out forms, of endless lines at government windows. Anna accompanied Arthur everywhere, using her days off to take him places, to explain the procedures, to keep him from giving up when the bureaucracy became unbearable. And during those 3 weeks, something else happened. The video went viral. More than viral. It exploded. Journalists started digging. They found the name of the guy in the Audi, Leo Taylor, 24, son of a real estate mogul. Leo had a history of traffic violations, assault charges, a life of privilege that shielded him from the consequences of his actions. But this time, with millions of people outraged, with trending hashtags, with pressure on social media, the shield cracked. The district attorney's office opened an investigation. Leo's family issued an official statement apologizing. Leo appeared in a video, clearly forced, offering a generic, empty apology, his eyes betraying that he felt no remorse, only annoyance at being caught. And then the journalists found Arthur. It was Anna's decision. Arthur wanted no attention, didn't want to be news, didn't want his shame exposed nationally. But Anna argued, Mr. Price, how many other old men are on the streets right now, being humiliated, being ignored? If you tell your story, maybe it will change something. Maybe other people will pay attention. Arthur agreed. He gave an interview to an investigative news channel. He told his story, all of it. The construction company, the bankruptcy, the lost family, the years on the street. He didn't mention the fund, because they still weren't sure they could get the money. The report aired on a Thursday night, and it exploded, because it was no longer just about an old man being humiliated. It was about a man who had had everything, lost everything, been abandoned by everyone and still maintained his dignity. It was about how society discards the old, the poor, the fragile. It was about empathy, about humanity, about the thousands of invisible people pushing carts through the streets while the world speeds by in black Audis. And that's when Arthur's children appeared. Robert called first. Anna answered her cell phone. Arthur didn't have one, and recognized the name when the man introduced himself. "I'm his son," Robert said, his voice polite, professional. "I saw the report. I was shocked. I had no idea my father was in that situation. I need to see him. I have to help." Anna looked at Arthur, who was sitting on her living room sofa. She had brought him there to organize documents. Arthur turned white when he heard his son was on the line. "He wants to talk to you," Anna said. Arthur shook his head violently, his hands trembling. He didn't want to. He wasn't ready. Anna returned to the phone. "He'll call you back. Leave your number." Robert gave the number, insisted it was urgent, that he wanted to help. Anna hung up and turned to Arthur, who had tears in his eyes. "My son," he whispered, "after 23 years, my son." The next day, Julia called. Same story. She had also seen the report, also wanted to help, was also shocked and full of regret. Anna was immediately suspicious. 23 years of silence, and suddenly both children appear at the same time, right after a national news story. Too much of a coincidence. But Arthur wanted to believe. Because a father wants to believe. Because the heart of a father abandoned by his children never fully heals, and any crumb of possible reconciliation looks like a feast. Anna arranged a meeting for a Sunday afternoon at a local cafe. Arthur was as nervous as a teenager on a first date. Anna helped him shave properly, gave him a clean shirt that had belonged to her late father, and lent him money for the taxi. "I'm going with you," she said. "You don't have to. They're my children." "That's exactly why." Anna looked him straight in the eye. "I'm going. I'll sit at another table. But I'll be there." Robert and Julia arrived together. Arthur recognized them immediately, despite the 2 decades. Robert, now a 37-year-old man, in an impeccable suit and expensive watch. Julia, 39, elegant, made up, a designer handbag. They were familiar strangers, people who had left his life as children and returned as adults he didn't know. The meeting was awkward, uncomfortable, full of long silences and poorly chosen words. Robert talked about his career as a manager at a multinational. Julia about the architectural firm she managed. They talked about how they had thought of him over the years, how their mother had forbidden contact, how they regretted it. Arthur listened, wanting to believe, but sensing something wrong in the way they spoke, the way they avoided direct eye contact. It was Julia who finally got to the point. "Dad, we saw the report. And we also saw—" She paused, uncomfortable. "We saw on the internet that you have some money. A trust fund." Arthur's stomach froze. How did they know? "Investigative journalists," Robert explained, sensing the confusion. "They found out. There's a story coming out tomorrow. About the $687,000. Arthur glanced at Anna, who was at another table, and saw the anger on her face. She had realized it too. "We wanted to say," Julia continued, with a smile that tried to be warm but looked fake, "that we're here to help. You're going to need support to handle that money. Investments, planning. We can help you." Robert leaned forward. "And of course, as your legal heirs, it would be fair for us to receive our share. You're old, Dad. You won't be able to use all of it. It makes sense to start distributing it now, doesn't it?" There it was. The naked truth. They hadn't come for their father. They had come for the money. Arthur felt something break inside him. Not anger, something worse. Disappointment so deep it felt physical, like a breaking bone. "Get out," he said quietly. "Dad, don't be like that," Julia said, trying to take his hand. "We're just being practical. You've lived in poverty for so long, you don't know how to handle money." I said, "Get out." Robert turned red. "You have no right to judge us. You were the failure. You lost everything. You embarrassed us our entire lives." Anna was already on her feet, walking toward the table. But Arthur stood up first, shaky but firm. "You're right," he said, looking at the children he didn't know and who no longer knew him. "I was a failure. I lost everything. But I never abandoned you. I was abandoned. I sent letters for years. You never opened them. I tried to see you. Your mother stopped me. I never gave up on you. You gave up on me. That's in the past," Robert said, impatient. What matters is that you're leaving." Arthur grabbed the cane Anna had gotten for him from a donation. "And don't come back. You are not my children. Children don't show up only when there's an inheritance. Children show up when there's pain." And he walked out of the cafe, leaving Robert and Julia sitting there, stunned. Anna quickly paid the bill and ran after Arthur, who was walking too fast for his old legs, stumbling on the sidewalk. She caught up to him, held his arm. "Mr. Price, wait." He stopped, and Anna saw that he was crying. But these were different tears, not of sadness, of liberation. "I thought," he said, his voice thick, "that if they came back, everything would be fixed. That life would make sense again. But they didn't come back. People who looked like them came back, but it wasn't them. My children. My children died 23 years ago. Those two are strangers." Anna hugged him right there, in the middle of the sidewalk, as people rushed past without paying attention. Just another old man crying. Just another nurse consoling him. Just another invisible scene in the city that has no time to see pain. The money was released 3 weeks later. Arthur signed the papers in a massive bank, accompanied by Anna and a lawyer from legal aid. The manager was extremely polite, the kind of politeness that appears when a 6-figure balance is involved. Arthur looked at the printed bank statement. $687,434.18. All those numbers, all those zeros. "What are you going to do now?" Anna asked when they left the bank. Arthur stood on the sidewalk, feeling the sun on his face. For the first time in decades, he could make choices. He could buy an apartment. He could eat in restaurants. He could get medical care. He could live. But the first thing he did was hail a cab and ask the driver to take them to a furniture store. He bought a new bed, a sofa, a real table, chairs that weren't broken, and he had it all delivered to Anna's address. "Mr. Price, you don't have to—" "Yes, I do." He looked at her, this young woman who had believed in him when no one else did. "You gave me my dignity back. You gave me hope. You helped me when you had no reason to help. This is just the beginning. I'm going to help you with college if you want to go to grad school. I'll pay your bills while you study. His voice failed. "I'll try to repay a little bit of what you did." Anna cried, and she said yes. After, Arthur bought new clothes. He made doctor's appointments. He rented a small but decent apartment with a real window, with his own bathroom, with a shower that didn't leak. He began treatment for the pain, for his eyesight, for everything that was broken in his body. And then he did something no one expected. With part of the money, he created a fund to help other can collectors in the neighborhood. Not charity, investment. He bought better equipment, organized a cooperative, created a structure so they could work with dignity, not as beggars, but as workers. "Push that cart, old man." The words that had humiliated him became the name of the project, the Dignity Cart Initiative. And Arthur, for the first time in 23 years, felt that his life had purpose again, not because he had money, but because he had choice, because he had people who cared, because he was no longer invisible. One Sunday morning, 6 months later, Anna knocked on the door of Arthur's new apartment. He opened it, clean-shaven, wearing clean clothes, with new glasses that corrected his vision. He looked 10 years younger. I brought cake, Anna said, holding up a bag. They sat at the new table, drinking coffee and eating cake, talking about the Institute's projects, about Anna's next shift, about the trivialities of everyday life. And at some point, Arthur stopped talking and just looked at her. "What is it?" Anna asked. "I was thinking," Arthur said slowly, "that the real wealth wasn't in that bank account. It was in you, in someone who saw an old man on his knees on the asphalt and decided he was still worth something." He wiped his eyes. "I spent my whole life thinking I failed because I lost money. But I failed because I accepted being invisible, because I gave up believing I deserved to be seen." Anna took his hand. "And now," Arthur smiled, a real smile, perhaps the first in decades. "Now I exist again." Outside, the city kept spinning, indifferent. Thousands of people pushing carts, thousands of invisible old men, thousands of untold stories. But this story had a different ending, not because the money showed up, but because someone cared before the money showed up. And sometimes, just sometimes, when someone reaches out a hand, the world becomes a little less cruel.